Chapter 25. That night Dan lay on top of his bed and turned his thoughts to the day's events. He was sure the woman who called his name after the race was his wife. He smiled when he saw her face in his mind's eye. However, he couldn't come to terms with that sense of distance, something separating them. He couldn't imagine how he was going to leap over the chasm of time that was keeping them apart. He imagined himself standing on the one side of the Grand Canyon and she on the other side. Only the echo of their voices would carry their words. If only he could see himself the way he was, or would be, 25 years later, perhaps it would make it easier for him to choose whether to stay or to leave with them. Yet another thought returned to his mind, something Gustavo had said. You have a career path traced ahead of you. You want to become a Navy pilot. You want to climb the ladder of the Navy, but it's your choice entirely. The question was he a Navy pilot 25 years hence? Perhaps he was, and yet Dan didn't think so. But then, why wasn't he? Could he have chosen not to take the training? Could he have resigned after a while? And what about the children, all grown up and handsome kids they were? Why? Why? Was the last question that remained in the front of his troubled mind when he finally fell asleep. It must have been a couple of hours later when his dreams took him on a journey through a troublesome moment in his imagination. He was sitting on a sofa, a hand holding that of his wife. A strange book was on his lap. Then all of a sudden, as he was about to open the book, a ball of fire emerged from the fireplace and tore its way through the living room. The old woman who had been sitting across from them was thrown out of her chair and was crawling out of reach as he and his wife tried to escape the fireball. He screamed, "Malou! Malou!" before he woke up. He had no idea whether the dream was a recollection of something that really happened or simply a nightmare. He sat up and then realized that he was still dressed. He looked around him for a moment before getting up. He shook his head and went to the bathroom to splash some water on his face. In the hallway he threw a glance at the kitchen and, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a newspaper on the table. He couldn't recall reading the paper at any time during the previous day. His curiosity piqued. He went to grab it. It was opened at the classifieds page. His eyes travelled down the section of engineering positions advertised, and his gaze rested on one particular ad. For some reason he couldn't take it all in fast enough. This was exactly what he was looking for, if he were not going to take the training. He sat down, dismayed. "Do you think this would be an alternative to the Navy?" Damianos asked him quietly as he came to stand beside Dan. Dan looked up, and then returning his gaze to the paper, nodded. "But why would I do that?" Damianos sat down across from him. "Listen to me, son. You have all the qualifications required to take that job." Dan frowned. "Yes, you do, Dan. What's more, the Navy will be a dream that you have already lived. In your imagination, you have lived on the aircraft carrier day after day, taking flight from time to troubled spots in the world, waging wars against an enemy, shooting down a young pilot or two, boys the same age as you." He paused. "And then you came home to the base, to an empty room where only sleep could reconcile your desire for excitement and those for a family. You felt the joy coursing through your body when lifting your bird to the firmament, and you felt the emptiness of your life and the remorse for having killed another human being every time you landed. Are you sure you want to make that dream a reality?" "What about Fabio?" Dan asked. "We're going to take the training together." Damiano shook his head, lowered his forearms on his knees and folded his hands in front of him, while still looking at Dan. "Maybe he will follow in his father's footsteps, or maybe he will decide otherwise." "Does that mean I might be alone when I take the training next week?" "It might be, son, and then again you might both be someplace else at that time." He peered into Dan's eyes. "But whatever the choice, Dan, it should be yours and yours alone. Don't ever make the mistake of following in someone's footsteps or stand by a friend when you're not sure what you could do the job or enter a career by yourself." He smiled. "Friends disappear, Dan, but loneliness and regrets, once they set in, never do." "What about my love of flying? Do I give that up too?" "Why should you?" Damianos retreated to the back of the chair and crossed his arms over his chest. "God never leaves you without alternatives, Dan. If you wanted to get your pilot's certificate, or whatever is required for you to take a seat in the cockpit of an aircraft, he would be there to help you, the same as he did with Gustavo." "You think Gustavo wanted to drive those big trucks?" "Ever since he was a boy, yes, yet he only drove trucks in the army and saw the horrors of war as a reward for following a dream that nearly got him killed in the process. If he had had the same opportunity as you have today, he would never have been to Iran, or have found himself divorced and on the brink of losing himself to drugs and alcohol." "So you're saying I should apply for that job?" Dan tapped his finger on the advertisement. "Is that it?" "No, Dan, if you had been listening more closely, you would have realized that I have made your options a lot clearer for you. I have shown you where each choice could lead you, yet I will leave the decision entirely up to you." Both men fell silent. Then Dan looked up. What about my family? Those people I saw, they were my family, weren't they? Yes, Dan, and when you feel you're ready to meet them and return to your future with them, you shall. But I'm ready right now, Dan objected a little louder than he expected. Damiano shook his head. No, Dan, you can't go back with regrets lacing your heart. You need to make a decision and accept the consequences of that decision before you are ready to face them. What about them? Are they ready to take me back? Yes, they are, but God doesn't want to precipitate your reunion before they too accept the fact that you have alternatives and a choice to make. Dan turned his head to the window, and by the time he returned his gaze to Damianos, the man had disappeared. He cupped his head in the palms of his hands and began crying in earnest. Aboard the cruiser, Stefano and Malou were sitting alone across the table in the small living quarters. Gabby and Daniel had gone to bed. There's something I don't understand, Mum, Stefano began. What's that? Malou asked. Everyone is telling us that Dad is not ready to meet with us. Why would that be, do you think? You heard Solanke and Damien, didn't you? She looked into her son's eyes. They both told us that your dad had a choice to make. Yes, I know, Mum. I know what they said, but what is this really about? Dad has recognised us. At least he recognised you. Of that I'm sure. So why does he have to choose between staying where he is and going back with us? There is more to it than that, Stefano, Damiano said, as he came in to sit beside Malou. You see, your dad is at present at a crossroad in his life. When he fell, he unconsciously wanted to return to this particular place and at that particular moment in his life. Yes, Stefano said. I remember you saying something about that. But it's different. He's revisited Key West. He's probably seen what he wanted to see. So what's keeping him from choosing to return with us? Think about it, Stefano, Malou interposed. Your dad is at a point in his life when he has to make a decision. If I recall, he was about to take his pilot training when he changed his mind. She turned her head to Damianos. Isn't that right? Yes, Malou, and the reason he wanted to go back to Key West when he fell was because of the decision he made at the time. You mean he would have preferred taking the pilot training? Stefano threw a glance at his mother. So why didn't he? Did you make him change his mind? Malou saw the custatory look in Stefano's eyes. No, Stefano, I have not interfered in your father's decision and never will, yet I can feel that he has unresolved issues or even regrets with that decision. And that is why, Stefano, Damianos added, that we need to give your dad time to come to terms with the decision he will make. What happens if he decides to take the training after all? Where does that leave us? Stefano asked, fearing the answer. Damiano smiled. Remember, Stefano, no one, not even God, can or will change the past. What has been done, what has passed, stays in the past. Yet everyone may wish they had chosen another path in life, and these regrets often need redress. They need to be squashed in order to move on, as you often say in today's vernacular. So you're saying that Dad will make the same decision as he made 25 years ago, but will no longer rue the day he made it? Yes, Stefano, that's exactly what I meant. Your dad won't be able to change the past, but he needs to make the decision in full knowledge of the alternatives and knowing the reasons for which he chose not to go through with the training. But if he regretted not to have taken the training, why didn't he choose a related career then? I mean, there are plenty of careers available for an engineer. Because the opportunity didn't present itself at the time, son, Damianos concluded. Gustavo woke up the next morning and was on his way to take a shower when he noticed Dan's bedroom door wide opened and the bed looking as if no one had slept in it. He looked into the kitchen. It was empty and silent. Wondering where Dan was, he went to the hallway and looked at the peg where the keys used to hang. They were gone. Suddenly fear dropped at the pit of his stomach. Where has he gone in the middle of the night? He then noticed the newspaper on the table and his gaze rested on the ad that had attracted Dan's attention the previous evening. Gustavo shook his head and thought his friend had perhaps gone to apply for that job. But why would he do that, he wondered. He was so keen on taking that Navy training. Unable to come up with a reasonable answer, Gustavo dropped the paper back on the table and went to take his shower. Meanwhile, Dan, after driving along the beach for a while, had parked his car and had gone to sit on the sand. He couldn't reconcile the idea of going to an office and start a career with the opportunity he had to train as a Navy pilot. Everything Damianos had told him was right. Nevertheless, he knew he couldn't just walk away from the Navy. He was young, full of life, and nothing could stop me. And that's where you're wrong, Damien said, coming to sit in the sand beside Dan. Dan turned his face to the angel. Why is that wrong? Because you can't change your past, Dan. You've made the decision once, and although you have regretted it, you now need to reconcile yourself with it. Cast your mind forward to the time that you had a skiing accident, will you? And before Dan could argue, he found himself at the top of the ski slope, trying to decide whether to leap out onto the run. Damien was beside him. You were free, Dan, free to decide either to hop off onto the descent or remain here. What did you do? I went down and nearly lost my life, Dan replied. Exactly. Taking the training will lead you to the top of this hill, Dan, and then the only way to return to the lodge is to leap off the ledge and ski down to your death. You mean I could be killed? Dan asked, as if the thought never occurred to him. Damien nodded as he brought them back to the beach. It is an alternative worth considering, Dan.